hasn't been as bad as some other places have been. Places not far from you, in fact, like New York and places like that. I mean, Sydney's a large city of 5 million people, and we had an initial first wave. Interestingly, a cruise liner full of people coming to Sydney for the Hillsong conference. Many of whom were infected. Like, this was way back in March at the beginning of the pandemic, before we had really much idea of how bad this was. And for some reason, this cruise liner was able to dock and people were able to leave. And I'm not blaming Hillsong by any means, but it is just kind of intriguing that a bunch of them off this ship then went to the Hillsong conference and various other places around the city, which set off the first wave in Sydney, and we went into pretty heavy restrictions. I teach at a university, so all classes stopped. Everything was moved online. Interestingly, all those of us who are academics have been spending, I don't know how many years, talking about the need for education to move online and for us to embrace technology. And we've talked about this forever and pretty much hardly done anything about it. So suddenly we're all forced to figure out, how do we do the thing we've been talking about for ages? But Sydney has come through that quite well, and now restrictions are relatively eased. However, not far from us in Melbourne, and I've got a lot of good friends in Melbourne. Some people listening to this or watching this webinar might know my good friend Alan Hirsch. I've written a few books with. He lives in Melbourne with his wife Deborah, and they've just had a brutal second wave. It just took off just recently, and they have gone into stage 4 restrictions, which is as bad as it can get. But interestingly, unlike the United States and Britain and places like that, Melbourne just complied. I mean, people shut down, like businesses, restaurants, sports, everything just closed down. The city was literally a ghost town. I've seen photos from that. Now, the city, people weren't happy about it. There was lots of discussion about whether it was the right thing to do. But interestingly, they did it and they crushed the second wave. So, Aussies sometimes like to think that we're kind of, no one tells us what to do. We're kind of sort of wild, more frontiery kind of people. But it's interesting, we're quite compliant in this respect, and it had a pretty significant effect. And you've seen the same thing in Vietnam and South Korea and Taiwan. I mean, where there is compliance, it's been amazing how together a city can actually kind of pull together and defeat this thing.
Yeah, and when you look at how that impact has made on not only individuals and families and the communities and church culture, what have you been noticing as you've been talking? Because I gather you've had the ability because of this to kind of be speaking all over the place lately.
Yeah, I mean, people are referring to this as being an apocalyptic kind of experience. But actually, the word apocalypsis is about a revealing, an event that reveals something. In scripture, apocalyptic literature is usually kind of, visions and the like, revelations. And in some respects, I'd say, technically, literally using the term as it's intended, this has been apocalyptic because in a way it's kind of like peeled back a veneer and revealed a lot of things to us about ourselves. One of them was one I just mentioned to you, that Australians have this self-perception of us being kind of rugged individualists, like we're a kind of a don't tell me what to do kind of culture. And yet Melbourne was incredibly compliant on this like government imposed restriction. So it's making us rethink some of our cultural stereotypes in a way. But it's also it's made us rethink things like this didn't so much happen with the second wave, but with the first wave, here we were having this perception that we are kind of fine, generous, middle-class kind of people. And the obsession with hoarding toilet paper or pasta or, certain non-perishable foods, like it was phenomenal. I remember going, this was way back in March, going into a supermarket to buy, normal sort of provisions for that night or whatever it was. and I see there's no pasta and I see there's no toilet paper, and I felt an urge to see if I could find the last, bag of pasta. I wasn't even there to buy pasta, Shawn. I mean, it wasn't like I needed pasta, but it just brought out this like, oh my gosh, hoard, like get something for me. And it revealed to me personally, but I think it's revealed to us culturally, that there is a beneath the veneer of us being, having this perception of being, generous and caring middle-class suburban people, that beneath that actually there is a fear of scarcity, and there is a look after your own kind of mentality. So I feel like it's revealed some really interesting things about the stories we tell ourselves. And I think it's revealed some things to the church as well. I heard somebody say it's a little bit like lemon juice on invisible ink. The invisible ink is kind of the stuff that's real about us. We write in real ink who we think we are, what we think we are, but the invisible ink is the true message. And it's been a little bit like this pandemic has been like the lemon juice that is like reveals to us the things that we don't really like to say, or maybe that we don't even realize about ourselves, a couple being the things I've just mentioned. But with respect to the church, we've often said, well, the church isn't all about Sunday, and the church isn't all just about gathering, and we're the church 24/7. And then you took the Sunday meeting away from us, so we couldn't gather together any longer. And suddenly there are all these questions about, hold on, who are we? What is the church? How do we do church now? And so it revealed something about, we say we're not Sunday centric, but it did reveal to us we have high anxieties about what it means for us to be a congregation, or more generally the people of God, if we don't have that capacity to meet on a Sunday. Interestingly, my friend Alan Hirsch, who I mentioned before, uses the following analogy. He and I did a webinar like this, and he used this illustration where he said, the great chess teachers, when they're teaching someone to play, will get their student to remove the queen from their board from the beginning. So they'll teach all the moves from all the different pieces, but now take your queen away and now let's play. Now, of course, it's like playing with one arm or fighting with one arm tied behind your back. It's the most powerful piece. But if you play as a beginner with your most powerful piece, you rely entirely on the piece, on the queen, to do most of the work. Take it off, discover what all the other pieces can do, then bring her back, and then exponentially you increase in effectiveness. Apparently this is a technique teaching chess. And with the Queen's Gambit, now everyone apparently is into chess. So it kind of is relevant. But all that to say, his point was, it feels like the Sunday meeting is like the Queen. It's like the church has all these different pieces, all these different functions, all these different things that we are and do. But we rely really heavily on this thing, the Sunday meeting, to lift more than it's required to do all the work of being the people of God. And so we emphasize it. We fund it more than anything else. We build buildings exclusively to hold that meeting in it. We staff people whose significant amount of their time is spent on presenting that meeting. So it's our queen in that sense. And so the way Alan couched it was like, it's a little bit like, okay, the queen has been taken off the board. Now it's time. This is this revelatory thing I'm talking about, this apocalyptic idea. Now maybe you need to discover what the knight and the bishop and the rook and the pawns can do. Now maybe this is an opportunity for the church to discover really what it is for us to be the church without having to rely on our Sunday meeting to do all the work, as it were.
It's interesting to hear you say that. There's at least one bishop in that I could invite to share his impressions of what a bishop does, but I'll hold on that for a sec. But it's interesting because you've hit on something very interesting in that virtually globally, as Christians, we now have people who, as you say, whose primary function has been creating that Sunday worship gathering, feeding into it, designing it, making sure the right things are in place, and also buildings and infrastructure that in some parts of the globe have been essentially vacant for months. And in some places, as I've talked with leaders in various parts, there's this sense of we're almost kind of looking at each other and saying, well, now what? And it's an interesting, I use this term loosely, but it's an interesting gift, I think, that we as Christians have been presented with. Because as you say, our queen or our Sunday morning gathering, that kind of anchor has now kind of been removed as a stabilizing force.
Yeah, and I mean, at one level, it could just be, okay, we don't go to church anymore, but we just go about the rest of our business like we normally do, which I think would be really, really bad for church people. I think it should be seized upon as an opportunity, a dreadful opportunity. I take your point that you refer to it as a gift, using that term loosely. Saying all of this, when we talk about the opportunities that COVID presents the church, we are conscious that people's lives have been devastated by this through grief and trauma and the like. So I don't mean to minimize that. But yeah, I think you're right, that if we just took the queen off, but we didn't know how the other pieces play, well, what's the point of that? But now is an opportunity to seize upon what it means for us to equip and encourage and promote the use of all those other pieces. It's different for those who are clergy, as you say, because those who are clergy went into a role where, I don't know what percentage of their time, but a significant percentage was about preparation for and the conduct of those kind of gatherings. And so you've removed those from people, and there's an existential kind of effect. People feel the rug pulled out from under them, and I know that for a lot of pastors. In fact, the church that we attend, our pastor is a young woman who it's her first appointment as the lead pastor in a church, and it's been very, very difficult for her. Like, she didn't go into this thinking that this is what ministry would look like. Now, I think I'm not a pastor in a local church, but I think if I was, it happened to me, I think I would have had all this experience of ministry, and then to think, okay, this is not forever. This provides us with an important opportunity. Let's pivot. Let's ask ourselves what God's revealing. Let's respond to that. But for new pastors, I appreciate that it's been really, really disconcerting, and I'm very conscious of that. I think if anyone watching this has a relatively young or new pastor, they've geared their life toward ministry looking like this, and they've just started in it, and now it's completely like this, and that can be very disconcerting. So love the daylights out of them. They're not only questions about what do I do now, they're questions like, who am I now? Like, what was I called to be? It's a big deal for clergy. As I said, I think particularly younger clergy more so than for older ones. So again, this whole apocalyptic revelatory kind of thing, it's peeling back things and inviting us to do the work of thinking through, are we who we said we were? Culturally, are we a culture that we say we are? Societally, what do we need to learn? And as Christians, then what does it look like if we say that we're seeking to be missional in this world, if we can't rely on simply inviting people to our gathering of one kind or another? And look, in my context, we can gather, but frankly, it sucks. Our gatherings, we have to be 70 meters apart from each other. We have to wear a mask. You can't do congregational singing. I mean, my pastor said to me, thank you for coming. I said, look, I'll be honest with you. I only come so that you won't be too despondent, because I don't get very much out of it at all. And I'm not saying that in a whiny kind of complaining way. I'm saying we're in a weird season right now. It's not going to be like this forever, but this meeting, even if we get to have it, isn't that great. So what does it look like for us to equip people to actually do other expressions of life and faith without having to rely on the Sunday meeting for this period?
Yeah, I can totally relate to what you're saying. It's brutal going to church and, standing, especially people who you've known for a long time, and you're used to hugging or shaking hands, or, now doing that awkward at a distance, wave with a mask, and you can't tell if someone's smiling at you. And yeah, I was at the grocery store the other day, and saw someone I recognized, and um, tried to do that. I'm acknowledging your existence, but you can't see that I'm smiling at you because I've got a mask on. So I was thinking, I need to figure out how to smile with my eyes. And then I'm sure I look like a crazy person walking through the aisles of the grocery store, trying to figure out how to do that.
You need a mask that says I'm smiling on the inside or something like that.
Well, the problem is anyone who knows me knows that it wouldn't be a very true statement. Um, you were mentioning, Mike, the challenge of doing ministry in this era, and certainly, for many congregations, there are leaders all over, as you've been speaking to many, you've been teaching in many, um, you know, um, the whole concept of teaching to equip your congregation to be missional in mindset, in living out their faith. So it's not just, words, but it's a lived, expression of faith. And now all of a sudden we're in this difficult, all over the globe, people are in different levels of restriction and limitation. What are you noticing new trends in kind of living that missional life? Or is it kind of a sense of, we're just giving up until we can not be restricted?
Yeah, well, there is a bit of the latter, like, okay, let's just hang in here until we're no longer in restriction. So yes, there is some of that, but there is also some really interesting things happening. I think, at one level there are churches which are encouraging and supporting their members to actually live missionally in the neighborhood, given the restrictions. And we maybe can talk about some ideas where that has happened. So it's kind of like, okay, so you can't run the mainly music ministry anymore, and the youth group isn't meeting anymore, and the Sunday meeting isn't happening anymore. But here's some ideas for what you could do with your time to serve and love and be missional to your neighborhood. Then on the other hand, there are those who are saying, okay, well, it's not just how do you fill in your time, it's about how do you rhythm or cycle your life through this time. And the Sunday meeting or the home group or the ministry group, whatever ministry group you might volunteer in or help to lead, these have formed a rhythm or a pattern or a set of habits in your life. You go to church every Sunday, see people, you hug them, you have a cup of coffee or tea with them afterwards, you connect with them. That's a weekly rhythm. You're in a home group meeting, or you're also involved in, say, the children's ministry. So there's team meetings and there's the ministry itself. All of these are all activities, but they also cycle your life in a certain way. You remove them, and it's not just that you've got now more spare time, you no longer have any cycle or rhythm in your life. And I think it is important for pastors to help people think through, okay, what alternative rhythms or patterns or habits can I foster in a congregation's life if they're no longer the ones that they've had in the past? And there have been some churches thinking about this. I think maybe not as many as could be the case. And then to hold people accountable to those things. So, I mean, one church that I know of, they are now doing the 4 S's. These are 4 things that you're going to do every week. And then you interact with each other, either in small groups, depending on how tight restrictions are, or, via Zoom like this, where the 4 habits are Scripture. I'll spend at least one significant period of my life studying Scripture. Stillness, at least one significant period of the week I'm going to spend in prayer and meditation and contemplation, seeking to hear the voice of God. Sabbath, I'm going to actually take a day for rest. I'm not just going to work all day, every day and all night. What does it mean for me to actually rest and rejuvenate and be replenished? And then service. Who have I served this week? And in what way can I reveal or show people the reign of God through my actions? So it's a scripture, stillness, Sabbath, and service, and then being held accountable. Though you choose who you serve or how you serve, you choose what you spend your Sabbath doing, you decide what it's going to look like to study scripture, what you study, but I'm going to hold you accountable to it. So Shawn, you and I would meet and I'd be like, what did you do with scripture this week? What did you learn? Tell me, encourage me, bless me with what you've learned, and I'll do the same for you. In the stillness time, what did you hear? What did God say? What effect did that have on you? How did you spend Sabbath? That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about doing that. Who did you serve? So these become cycles or patterns that people live. And because we can't live them together, they have to be the kind of patterns that allow people to orient them around their schedules and their families and their lives individually. But the coming together to hold each other accountable is where the togetherness rhythm starts to unfold. So I think helping people to pattern their lives around an alternative set of habits as distinct from the meeting habits that they have had, and then building in levels of accountability. These are really, I think, important things. They sustain togetherness as well as connecting us to God, obviously. And if you've got ones like service and the like, then they ought also to be oriented outwards into the lives of others.
Yeah, that's a really good rhythm. And I can see how that type of, connectivity can enhance what people are doing for the worship gathering. Because certainly what I'm seeing here in North America is there are some places where, depending on the restriction, they are able to meet, with limited numbers. Others are still in a kind of a lockdown state, and so doing online things. And and you mentioned earlier, Mike, about your pastor of not knowing what to do. One of the common things that I've heard is this sense of I was never trained to be a video producer, and all of a sudden, pastors and leaders all over the place have quickly had to learn Zoom and learn how to create a YouTube account and upload video and record and and all of that. And so it's one of those interesting changes in the dynamic, and for many pastors, what I'm hearing is this sense of because we can't have gatherings the way we've been used to, that sense of connectivity, that sense of accountability, in however that looked, has been missing. So I like those 4 S's of how, which really could be used whether your community is able to gather or is still doing online stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, when I was in Fredericton, I spoke at that conference about the bells rhythms. You bless, eat, listen, learn, and be sent. It's similar to that. There are a whole variety of these kinds of things, but it's my point was specifically whether you use those 4 S's or bells or come up with your own, use an ancient one. It's about helping people have a pattern, a rhythm. And I think that's what people are really missing. They say, I'm really missing, seeing other people in the church or connecting with them. And I no doubt that's true. But I think also what's missing is the structure of a person's week or life. It's completely kind of changed in that respect. And depending on what context you are in, I mean, you could be working from home with kids who are having to be at home, with young children that are having to be at home. It can be kind of really exhausting and chaotic. And so the habits are not meant to be, okay, here's another bunch of meetings or things you have to do. It's meant to be, no, just cycle your life around these things. Don't allow your whole week to just be in Zoom meetings and looking at a screen. be propelled outwards into the life of your neighborhood, but also be more deeply connected to God. I mean, Sunday meetings and worship have done that for people. And if they're not possible, or not possible in the same way that they once were, then what does it look like for us to replace those rhythms with fresh ones, new ones? And I keep coming back to this, and being held accountable to it. So if I know that I'm meeting with you, Shawn, every Thursday, and we're just going to chat through what we've been doing, and I'm going to get inspired by what you're doing, and you by me, and if you're going to say to me, I didn't get a Sabbath this week, like, you're kidding, I've got this happening and that, then I pray for you, I love on you, I care for you. It's like, sure, like some weeks are like that. So they're the kind of things you might say on a Sunday meeting, but I'm not going to say that to you when I'm like 2 meters away from you with a mask on, bumping elbows. I mean, we have to find ways to reorient or reconnect our lives habitually, rhythmically, and together and with God, and then likewise to be propelled outwards into our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I like that. And, I'm using this term again, but to me, that's a great gift that we're being blessed with, because, in some ways, if our congregations would permit it, or kind of foster it, even if it's not the whole, but, you create this sense of accountability where you might not have been able to do it before, but it's also us caring for one another, where before we might just kind of chit chat, at coffee hour or whatever. But and it doesn't mean that either one of us have to be technologically adept, So if it's older people who, get nervous or anxious, they can do this kind of thing over the phone. And so that's, again, to me is a great gift that, this might be providing us as a church of fostering deeper relationships with one another, where we might have been able to get away with kind of a superficial sense of community.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people will talk about how alone they often feel in a Sunday meeting or in their church. I mean, I've heard that many times, that people would say, well, if I just kind of stopped attending, I don't suppose anyone would notice for weeks, and so, people can already feel a sense of isolation, even if they're attending gatherings. Whereas kind of collective cycling of their life together and accountability can be a way of more meaningful interactions and connections. It's not a magic bullet or anything. I'm just saying, if my current rhythm has now collapsed, do I just deal with that, or is the church collectively going to figure out a way that we might replace that with a different set of rhythms? And as I'll come back to it again, since we're talking about being missional in a pandemic, I think some of those rhythms ought to propel me outwards into my neighborhood. Now, again, depending on the level of restrictions, what that actually means, but I would have thought now's a perfect time for us to start praying for our neighborhoods and to let our neighbors know that we're praying for them. Ask neighbors by whatever means you're able to connect or contact with each other, letterbox dropping or WhatsApp group, or if you're able to kind of see each other in the street, I'm praying for everyone in the street. Like, how can I pray for you? Or is this and even a Canadian who's as secular as whatever, who just thinks, whatever. In this time and day, people are like, I don't even know if that works, but actually, my uncle's really sick. Could you pray for him? I mean, we've found it really amazing how many people are really open to have you pray. They're not sure whether it works or not. They don't necessarily believe it. But wow, if you're willing to kind of pray for my uncle or my grandmother, or, my kids who are going stir crazy, go right ahead. I mean, if part of those rhythms are about fostering us as a prayerful people in this, in our neighborhoods and communities, that's super important. I mean, I think, look, when we look back on, oh my gosh, the pandemic of 2020, that was terrible. How did the church respond to that? my fear is that a lot of what people will remember is, oh yeah, the church got like really up in arms about not being able to meet on Sundays. And, churches, I don't know about in Canada, but, the USA, churches are defying, the restrictions, and churches are furious about religious freedoms. And you think, is that what we want to look back and remember? That what we did was like stick up for our rights and our meetings, and would you rather that you look back and say, oh my gosh, like salt and light, like those Christians just spread out throughout neighborhoods and towns and cities and communities. They prayed like crazy, they served others. I mean, that idea that we might come to the fore, if you like, in this time of really significant need. I mean, which takes us right back to the beginning of our history as Christians. I mean, in the very earliest times of the Christian era, where plague or sickness came upon a particular town, Christians in the nearby town would actually pray together about who of their number should move to the infected town in order to minister to and pray for and share the gospel with those who are dying and contract a disease and die along with them. I mean, this was one of the things that had the biggest impact on the Roman Empire. Was those Christians will just like empty themselves. They will die for others in order to minister to them and share the gospel with them. Now, that seems incredibly dramatic, and I'm not asking that to happen because it's not quite at that level now with this pandemic. But to actually be known as the Christians who extended themselves in a time of international crisis, that's what we should have been known for, rather than fighting for our right to meet on Sundays.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's very true, Mike. I mean, it's an interesting witness that ends up happening whether we realize it or not. If we're fighting for what we say are our rights, versus we're fighting for the rights of those in our community. We're fighting, prayerfully for the health and well-being of those in our community. And I think too, what a witness that would be. If whatever our context is, whether it's, we live on, in a rural community where our neighbor might be a 5-minute drive away, or, we live in a community where our neighbor is a 5-second, walk away. But to be known as, the person that they could turn to, whether it's, needing help running errands, or, just offering a word of encouragement or helping with, whatever's going on. Loneliness and isolation is huge, regardless of generation. If you're a personality that, tends to be extroverted and likes to be around people, and all of a sudden you're in a lockdown pandemic, not that I'm speaking from experience, you might start to go stir crazy in a small apartment after a couple of days. And so these are realities that we're facing today as the church that we've never really been prepared for.
Yeah, I think, the church ought to be equipping us, encouraging us, and preparing us for that. I mean, I said that initially the first wave hits us and we're all freaked out about toilet paper, and our deep-seated fears of scarcity kind of come to the fore. And it's like, grab stuff for me, who cares about anybody else? And then there was, like, after that, there was another iteration of that where people then started letterbox dropping all their neighbors. Here's my cell phone number. Call me if you have, need anything. And then there are others who are like, here's our WhatsApp group. Like, let's get a street WhatsApp group together. Let's connect with each other. Who needs, help? Who needs me to, I'm going to the pharmacy. Do you need me to pick up anything for you? And particularly for the elderly or the shut-in or those who were anxious about because of immune deficiency and the like, about being out in stores and the like. Suddenly, neighborhoods started connecting with each other. Now, I wish I could say that they were the Christians that motivated all of that, but still, there is a sense of neighborliness what does it look like for the church to kind of really step in and, yes, support that and endorse that and encourage that? And as simple as, like, scrawling encouraging messages on the sidewalk with chalk, or as simple as connecting, over a fence in a socially isolated way. I don't know what it's like in New Brunswick where you are in this respect, but in lots of big city and suburban contexts, people don't even know their neighbours' names. I mean, or they might know, oh, that's Shawn, lives across the road. I don't really know that much about him. I know his name, that's about it. But, to actually kind of connect to neighbours and to find out, oh, I thought they were just the old Dutch couple that lived across the road, but wow, they got a fascinating story and their son did this and blah, 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 blah. Like, now's an opportunity for us to actually kind of connect with neighbours. And the things that I'm hearing again and again from people are that people are saying, non-Christians and Christian alike are saying, what's wrong with us? Why didn't we all know each other's names and be better connected before now? Like, I'm really glad that this is happening. And of course, Shawn, there are people who are like, no, leave me alone, I'm fine, I got it all sorted. Of course, we treat you with respect. Here's our number, we're available anytime. But yeah, no, we're not going to force ourselves on people. So streets are discovering each other and neighbours are discovering each other. And I think this provides enormously fertile opportunity for us as missional people to actually be salt and light in that context. I'll tell you an interesting story. A friend of mine, I mentioned that cruise ship that came into Sydney and hundreds of people were infected, and that then spread out throughout the city. One of those couples, there was an elderly couple that live in the same street as a friend of mine. And the elderly man contracted COVID and passed away. And those were the days where, funerals could only have 5 people. And I mean, it was incredibly difficult for his widow. But everyone in my friend Dave's street are on a WhatsApp group, and they're all WhatsApping each other and saying, it's just not right that, he should pass and there's 5 people at his funeral and then that's that. So let's do a tribute to him. And they come up with this idea of all standing at the front of their driveways, all like socially isolated from each other, up and down the street, just standing at their driveway in kind of tribute to him, which was a kind of a lovely thing. So they all go out, stand on their driveways, and then people are yelling down the street like, somebody should say something. And then others are like, what do you say? And then, like, my friend Dave is a Christian. So they're like, Dave, you're a Christian, say something. And so Dave, like, yelling on the top of his lungs up and down the street, Dave is like, reciting scripture, saying a prayer and giving a short eulogy. Like, he's giving a little sort of secular funeral on the driveway of his street. Like, who could imagine that, like, this would lead to an opportunity like that? I'm not in any way minimizing the trauma that elderly guy's wife has gone through, but what I'm saying is this invites us to come to the fore. People feel like there's death, there's grief. What do you say now? How do you respond to this? Oh, you guys are Christians, you should know that. Well, we should know that, shouldn't we? We should know how to speak into circumstances like that and to bring comfort and hope and to honour others. We ought to be schooled in that. And I don't just mean clergy. I mean, I think those of us who are Christian people ought to be schooled at what it means to speak truth and comfort and love into circumstances of suffering and difficulty and trauma. So here's our opportunity. Like, how equipped have we been? And what does it look like for us to actually speak in that way? Whether it's to say, let me pray for you, whether it's to say, let me help you, whether it's to offer some practical support, or whether it's actually to speak some level of truth into people's lives. I've had friends say, I'm on a WhatsApp group with all the mothers of my school, my kids' school friends. And we're all WhatsApping about, homeschooling and parenting and all that jazz, but it regularly comes up, like, what the F is going on with our world? Like the American election and Russia and China and COVID and holy smokes, the explosions in Lebanon and yikes. People are saying, is our world ending? Is something happening? What's going on? Now, those are existential questions about a time of great kind of dislocation and dissonance. And my friend was saying, I wanted to be able to share the gospel, but I didn't want to just say, oh, well, get ready because you could be going to hell when you die. I didn't want to just say, oh, well, Jesus loves you. Like, how do I speak the truth of the gospel into that experience of dissonance? Now, I'm really thrilled that they're asking that question, but Shawn, why have people not asked that question like up until now? It's because we're often so disconnected from our neighbours, or because our neighbours aren't really asking significant existential or spiritual questions. So now both of those things are happening. We're connecting more. People are asking questions more. We need to be better equipped, or at least more schooled, at what it means for us to be able to speak the truth of the gospel, as well as words of comfort and support, in settings like that. I have another friend who was saying she was talking to the cleaner at her school. She's a teacher, this woman. She's talking to the cleaner, and the cleaner was saying, she has friends who have been sick with COVID, not yet passed away, but she was just saying, like, what is going on? I can't make sense of what's happening in this world. And my friend she reported to me what she said to the cleaning woman, and I thought, no, it was a great word that she spoke. But it occurred to me that there are lots of people going through this period, like that cleaning lady, who have no institutional support. Like, back in the day, you might have belonged to a church, or you might have belonged to a union, or you might have belonged to a community group, or families were much more connected, and there were institutions in place, pardon me, that helped you to frame your thinking and to make sense of what's going on in the world. But now we're dealing with people where there are no such institutions. You don't belong to a union, you don't belong to the Lions Club or the community groups. You're not part, your families are often smaller and often in different parts of the country and disconnected. You're not part of a church. All those institutional supports and structures are missing. And yet we are the people who are part of a community of faith, who bind together, who learn from each other, who have a belief in our understanding of the world, who have a framework on making sense of what's going on, both good and ill. Like, we ought to be gold. We ought to be like, wow, there aren't too many people like you in this world. And I don't say that in any sense of kind of, like we're better than anybody. It's just that we ought to have, after all this time, actually develop the structures and frameworks, the ideas, the ways of speaking that can make sense for people, particularly when they feel isolated, confused, frightened, or actually going through grief and trauma.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly what I'm seeing here in our part of the world, and I think it's a fairly common, is we're seeing a rise in various forms of abuse in the house. A number of cases, of mental illness that was probably manageable under better circumstances, whereas now all this uncertainty, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, and so that's on the rise. I read recently here in New Brunswick, they said, for those who were joining us in different parts, New Brunswick has had cannabis legal for a little while now, and sales of cannabis and alcohol are through the roof, which is good for the government. But there's all these underlying social issues that have been kind of buried because things have been quote unquote normal, and I use that term very, very loosely, and now this pandemic, I think, has really put a magnifying glass and heightened it, where these types of social issues that, as you say, some can be resolved through connectivity and support with one another and journeying together. Not all, but some. The isolation and the confinement and people feeling like they live in a pressure cooker has just heightened all that. I don't know, are you seeing things like that in Australia as well?
Yeah, I don't know about cannabis, but definitely alcohol sales have gone through the roof, as have home handyman and hardware goods as well. So, I mean, people
Yes,
are,
you can't buy lumber very cheaply anymore here in New Brunswick.
no, exactly. So people are like doing stuff to their house. But yeah, alcohol has gone just through the roof in terms of sales. I've heard lots of warnings from domestic violence support agencies and the like about the fear of this. I haven't heard anything in my country yet about specific figures about whether those numbers have gone up or not, but it makes perfect sense when there's already violence or coercive control in place, and now you put people under, you isolate them and you give them restrictions. As it makes perfect sense that that would be likely to increase the terror and the fear. And so again, you know, it is, well, I think a lot of the agencies in this country are speaking a word into encouraging people to connect with support services and the like. But it could well be that in terms of this, like this peeling back, this apocalyptic idea, this revealing of things, people may well feel that they'll find that they discover in terms of their interactions with their neighbours, that they discover these kinds of issues, excessive alcohol use or domestic violence or mental health challenges. And yeah, I think it is important for churches to help and equip their members to know how to triage those kinds of things. You're not an expert, you're not a psychologist or a social worker, but to be able to alert neighbours and friends to the support structures that are in place in our cities is also an important thing to equip people. I would think also one of the big challenges for many groups would be, for many places, would be the effect this is having on small business. If you own a small business, oh my gosh, I can't imagine what it's like, what you're going through now. If you own a gym or a cafe or a restaurant, or the pressure placed on small business is phenomenal. And so I don't know what Canada's doing. Our country is providing all sorts of financial support, but whether some of those businesses will survive or not is now really in doubt. And so I would have thought that, like, what would a good church do? It would say, like, when restrictions are eased, everybody eat at Joe's Cafe. Like, I know it's more expensive than the one across town, but he's in our neighborhood, he's in our parish. Like, this is our community that we've been placed in. Support that restaurant, join that gym, like bless that business in some way, because I think this is an act of missional generosity as well, to actually kind of be a blessing to people in our neighborhoods, which includes something as simple as supporting local businesses when they're doing it, you know, really, really tough. Actually, I remember staying in Los Angeles, not far from Amy Semple McPherson's old church, that, you know, now called the Dream Center, but Angelus Temple. And I remember eating at a couple of restaurants nearby, and one of them had a brochure which was the history of our cafe. And they said that, you know, they opened during the Depression, and it was like, it wasn't getting off the ground. They thought they were going to, you know, have to close. And Amy Semple McPherson came in and said, "Oh, I love this cafe. We support any business that's in our neighborhood. I'll tell everyone in my church to eat here." And like, the church rode that business through the Depression, and it's still in operation today. And I think, wow, that is genuine missional support. It's like we are on the side of our neighbours, including local businesses, including those that are under the kind of personal pressure that you were talking about before. Know about the services, support them, encourage people to access them.
Yeah, good idea. I've seen in some communities where they've been pushing, particularly in the early part of the pandemic, of there was a night kind of designated to order from a local restaurant. You know, instead of kind of the box restaurants or the big chains, but um, you know, they've been encouraging that, you know, local expression to keep, as you said, local business, because Certainly in Canada, we've been fortunate in government subsidies and things like that, but those only go so far, as and yet still a number of local businesses that have been around for decades have had to close, and and that affects the community as well, right? I want to extend an invitation to people to, if they have questions. We won't be able to get to them all if everyone has questions, but if you use the Q&A button at the bottom of the panel and put your question in there, I'll try to grab a few to throw at Mike to see if we can stump him. One thought, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Mike, is because I mean, I know a large part of your ministry is also kind of watching what's happening in the church globally and in the culture. What do you think that with what we're experiencing now in this pandemic, what impact do you think that has on the future of the church?
I'm not a futurist by any means, but I think it could either it could be the catalyst for a kind of a new era of engagement. I mean, there's been lots of discussion in your country and mine about neighborhood mission, connecting to neighbors, being more kind of rooted in the community. We've talked about that a lot, but maybe not so much action on that. It could very well be that this terrible experience of a pandemic is the thing that catalyzed us into action. But I'm a bit of a hopeful cynic. So while I hope that might be the case, the cynic in me also fears that we'll just ride this out and then go back to normal when all else goes back to normal. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure. I think the worst thing that could happen is if we just snapped back into the way things were and not see this, as terrible as it is, as an opportunity that could invite real insight and growth. Back in the year 2000, Sydney had the Olympics, and if you've ever lived in an Olympic city during the Olympics, or if you've never lived in one, you won't really know what it's like. But it's the whole city has a party together, basically. And the cool thing about it was everywhere you went, people talked to each other. So you would get on a train to go to an event and you would just look across the carriage at the person who's sitting there and say, "Hi, where are you from?" That was the standard question you asked. And they might say, "I'm from Canada, I'm from Brazil." "Oh, really? What are you here for?" And a conversation happens. But they could say, "I'm from Newtown. I'm from Parramatta. I'm from," like which is just down the road. And then you'd be like, "Oh, really? I've got an aunt that lives there." And what we found was conversations, connections were happening everywhere. It was fantastic. Now, the Olympics last for 2 weeks. So I can remember those whole 2 weeks, people were saying, our city has been awesome to live in. Like, people are courteous and friendly and people are interacting with each other. This is great. There's all these visitors from around the world. Let's keep this going. Let's be like this forever. And the Olympics ended like 2 weeks later. Boom. The next day you got on a train and people had their heads, in books or screens. Like boom. It just went straight back to the way it was. Now, this pandemic has been going on longer than that. So it's not quite like just 2 weeks of something. Of course, you'd snap back to what you were. But my big fear is that it could be like if magically, Donald Trump's vaccine works and we're all like, bingo, it's all finished. Will we all just be like, yay, let's go back to exactly what it was like? I would think that would be a real, in a way, it would dishonor what we've all been through. It would say we didn't actually take this dreadful opportunity to really rethink who we are and how we engage and what it means to be the people of God in a neighborhood. I mean, my definition, I mentioned this when I was with you guys, my definition of mission is to alert people everywhere to the universal reign of God through Christ. And of course, excuse me, when you're in a time of great trauma, people think, well, what reign of God? How is God reigning? This looks like it's out of control. But actually, I think it's in the times where people feel things are out of control that they're most desperate for a word about a God who is in control. And I think to alert people to the reign of God, which is to speak the gospel of truth and hope and life, but also to demonstrate the values of the kingdom of justice and reconciliation and beauty. Now's a great opportunity to beautify your neighborhood, to bring life and hope into that. I think this is an important and decisive opportunity which could set rhythms in place which see us into the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think there's a deep desire within all of us, no matter what the situation, to almost go back to Egypt. Yet knowing there is that promised land that awaits us. But the journey there is unknown and uncertain. And so we'd rather go back to the hell that we lived because we knew it. And not to say people listening don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that our churches have been hell, but there's an opportunity, or I'll use that term again, a gift in this, to kind of be thinking about what opportunities are there, to let go of some things that we've never felt we've been able to, and to move in a new direction that the Spirit might be leading us.
Yeah, I mean, you've used the Exodus, but I think also the exile is another good example of that. It's like, when the prophet says, don't listen to those people who are saying this will just be for a short while and then we just go back and everything will be fine. This will be an extended period. And while we're in it, let's learn different rhythms of what it is to love our neighbors, raise our children, be a gift to our oppressors, to the city that has taken us captive. I mean, it's an extraordinary call. It's not a gift in the sense that we wanted it, but here in Babylon, it might be that we can discover something about God and about ourselves that we could never have discovered safe back in Jerusalem or back in Israel. And in fact, that's literally true. The exile gives rise to rhythms in the life of Israel, like Sabbath keeping and a number of the feasts that become important rhythms in the life of Israel, emerge out of the experience of the Babylonian exile. So no, it was no gift that we wanted, and it was a difficult and painful and traumatic time. But in the midst of that, it actually kind of reset something in us as the people of God that did propel us forward, even when we went back to Israel, even to this very day. There are certain rhythms and practices that have sustained the Jewish community that emerged out of that trauma. Wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to say that was what the Christians did, that in the midst of a pandemic, they discovered new rhythms that actually sustained them well into the future?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Mike, Heather, who is in Winnipeg, has this question. Thoughts about how to engage in a deeper but not threatening way with people who didn't previously know, who are now participating in online worship in many of their communities out there.
I'm no expert on this, so these will be just guesses on my part. So people who've stayed connected to online worship, you don't know them. Well, I guess gift giving, inviting them into either WhatsApp groups. I did notice a question come up, so I didn't know what a WhatsApp group is, but it's just an encrypted and safe messaging service. It's quite brilliant, really, for smaller groups to kind of interact and connect with each other really effectively. So inviting newcomers into a WhatsApp group, which is a kind of a safe next step. I've just been watching your online service. If someone contacts me and says, would you like to join a WhatsApp group? There's people in your general neighborhood. That's a safe next step. I may not be a bit anxious about, sort of joining something, but WhatsApp, okay, I'll read and engage if I want to or not. That's not a bad first step. But, if it's about hey, where do you live? We want to drop a gift around. I've got a friend in California whose church gave out bouquets of flowers in in toilet rolls. So the toilet roll was like the vase. So they were handing out toilet roll bouquets. Like, just, they're funny. People laugh when they get them, but they are a way of saying, oh, I see the importance of this, and I want to give you a gift in a way that kind of is quirky and maybe builds some deeper sense of connection. Um, I've heard some it's interesting she asks about, connecting with people who are joining online church services, because I've heard some really worrying statistics around the numbers of Christians who connect at online church services. Like, significant numbers of our church are not attending our online services. So that's going to be a very significant challenge, which is why I'm really pushing down into making alternative rhythms that connect people rather than just viewing or observing a meeting on Sunday.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge challenge, because not only the not connecting, but people also becoming used to and creating that new rhythm of, oh, I can, make my own coffee and stay in my pajamas and even stay in bed and just tune in, to watch the live stream, or I can watch it in the afternoon.
Right, or put the live stream on and then like be on my phone, on
Yeah.
social media or something. I mean, yeah, it's like, I'll be honest with you. It's kind of like when you're in a church meeting and you think, oh, maybe I could just go on Instagram right now. Oh no, that would be considered rude. I better not do that. Well, now people's worst impulses all come out. So just relying in an online church service to kind of fill the needs of the faith community, it's not enough. It's not enough. It's why levels of connection, accountability, mutual support, cycling of lives together, these things are incredibly important to people who are being made isolated through restrictions.
And the other thing that I've mentioned to some, because this has come up with some of our congregations, of how, noticing they have new people connecting. And one of the things I said is, no matter how they're doing it, find a way to put, either a cell number or an email up there to, and say, if you're new here, we want to connect with you. We have something for you. And so, it could be that, bouquet with a toilet roll, or, could be an invitation to join an online small group, or, those little things where even, they've made that first step to want to watch. They might make that next step to say, oh, okay, I can, send a text, that's still not too personal. It's, I'm still in my safe space, or I can shoot an email, or, go onto Facebook. Karen.
Yeah, because there are lots of people who are like, oh, I don't have to go to my church anymore. I can watch, Shawn's church in Canada now. So there is a kind of a voyeuristic kind of like, oh, I'll just pop in there and see what that's like. Well, you don't really need to connect to those people. They're just popping in to like see what happens in other churches.
Yeah.
But if you are finding that there are people who are like regularly engaging, yeah, they're indicating something that this is of some value to me. And so, yeah, they're the people that I think you would want to encourage to take a next step. And a simple one like WhatsApp, or join, an online group, or join a Facebook group, or send a text. They're good, simple second steps to take. But in saying all of this, I do want to emphasize, again, don't rely too much on your queen on the Sunday meeting to do everything. Like, find out what those darn bishops are doing.
Karen, who I know
you are wearing your purple shirt right now too, Shawn. I should have pointed that out.
It's red, for the record.
Oh, is it? It looks purple to me.
Since I primarily work with Anglicans, I no longer own anything that's a purple top. Karen Wilk, who Mike, also said that in Canada and the US, there's an app called Nextdoor, which does the neighborhood thing as well. And you might be gifted enough to be the first one to begin it in your neighborhood. like
And Cam Roxburgh says your your shirt does look purple. So it's like, that's the consensus.
yes, thank you to dear friends Brian and Cam. There's another question here that
We've set off a stream of references to your shirt. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Kevin has this question, and he says, becoming missional is to adopt a healthy habit of extending ourselves to the service of others. How do we traverse from idea to action?
Yeah, well, I agree with his statement, the first part of that, absolutely. Well, in the kind of ways that we've been talking about. I mean, letterbox drop your neighbours, give them your cell number, start, put a blackboard or a whiteboard up in the front of your house and invite people to, like, put either encouraging messages or needs that they might have. I heard about a guy in the UK who started showing films up on the side of the apartment block, and everyone was watching them in their front yards around. It's just been phenomenally interesting kind of things. I mean, some churches have put up a little food pantry, just a box with a door on the front, just filled with non-perishable things and toilet paper. You can build your own little one out the front of your house. I mean, there are myriad ways that you can start to engage with your neighbours. It's been fascinating to see the level of creativity and engagement that neighbours have embraced. I wrote a blog called 35 Ways to Love Your Neighbour during the pandemic, like 35 literal practical ideas. And so if you want to Google Frost 35 ideas or something like that, you'll be able to find a whole bunch of kind of good creative things that people have been doing.
Another question here, Mike. As difficult decisions around public budgets are made in the coming years, do you think there's a way for the church to be missional by being engaged in these public discussions?
Yes. I actually wanted to say something about that, and it kind of slipped my mind. Absolutely. I think, either catalyzing those discussions as a church leader or joining them if they're already happening is absolutely essential. Business leaders, community group leaders, social and welfare workers will start meeting about what does this look like for us to move forward as a city or a town or the like. And in many cities, I think Canada's the same as Australia, in lots of settings, they won't think of the church as being important in that. So yeah, clergy, bishops, people like that do need to step up and say, we'd like to contribute to that conversation, not just for our own benefit, but what does it look like for us to speak a word into those kinds of networks of business leaders, community groups and the like. So, connect to your local chamber of commerce, talk to the local mayor, like just say, if these discussions aren't happening, can we host them? Can we get them started? Can we be part of them? Because I think the church brings a really important voice into this setting. Now, if when you join those meetings, it's all about the church's needs and what the church wants, that is not going to be responded to very, very well. But if you're saying we want to help rebuild our communities, and I've got 100, 200, 500, 20 people, whatever it is, in my church, we want to mobilize behind the town, that speaks volumes. So yeah, good question or good comment, and that's absolutely essential.
Thanks for that, Mike. We're at kind of time. Final thoughts that you have for Mike?
Final thoughts for me?
Yeah. And, as you're living this out, what I guess what word of encouragement would you have for people living this out?
I would say you have to be brave and strong. It's a difficult time for us all. It's not like Christians are not affected by this, and I'm saying go and engage with those who are affected by it. We are all affected by it. There are people, as I said before, who may be under restrictions with small children or with sick relatives or maybe sick themselves. We are affected by this as much as our neighbours are. And so it takes a reserve of spiritual strength to kind of rise beyond that and to not just focus on our own needs and interests and to be other oriented. So draw on the strength of the Holy Spirit, be inspired by the vision and the example of Jesus. These are incredibly important things. Be conscious of how, as we said right at the beginning of this conversation, how painful this is for pastors and clergy, and love on them, care for them, drop them messages of encouragement in some way. Be aware of how difficult that is for them. I mean, you know, a lot of us, our work has been reoriented because it's now via screens or at home. So we've all been affected in some way, but I do think clergy, particularly local church pastors, have been particularly affected. God love them. So yeah, let's throw our support behind them in some way. And let's just pray, as I said before, that just like the exile for Israel, might it be that this is our Babylon and that we are able to develop the kinds of rhythms that transform our lives. Now, you know, they're in exile for decades, and this won't be, I don't think, decades for us, but life won't be entirely the same for a long time. So let's build those kind of rhythms and practices that are likely to actually become the norm, and that in decades to come, people who didn't necessarily go through this in the same way will just take for granted that what our church does is we have missional rhythms. We are other oriented. We serve our neighbours. We're rooted in neighbourhood. We support local businesses. We have a say in the shape of the city. That's just normal, ideally, in the days and decades ahead.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Mike. I think it's important as well. I think, you know, just to add to what you said, for leaders in the church to give themselves a break a bit. You know, far too often I've heard the statement of, I'm just so exhausted because I can't do what I see, you know, the pastor down the street doing, or the parish, you know, down the road. And, you know, every time I hear that, I say, you know, you're not meant to do what they do. You're meant to do what God gifted you to do. And I think there's an opportunity as well where, you know, whether we're from the same denomination or even if we're not, you know, but if we're in the same community, there could be an opportunity to say, okay, you have the tech ability, I've got the ability here, you know, with this, or, you know, how do we work together to pool resources so it's not, I'm now all of a sudden a pastor, a preacher, a video producer, a field reporter, and, you know, and at the same time trying to maintain some level of sanity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Mike, I wonder if, would you mind praying and asking a blessing on the people who've been able to join us tonight?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've seen a few names pop up of people that I know. So grace and peace to you, especially Cam and Karen and Jonathan and a few others. I can't see faces or names, but when you pop up and tell me that, yes, Shawn is wearing a purple shirt, then I've seen you. So peace to those people of you who I know and love. But thank you to everyone else who has joined. I really appreciate you giving of your time. So yeah, by all means, let me pray. Father, it's a funny thing to pray to a telephone screen for people who are on the other side of the world. It's extraordinary, the world that we live in. And yet, in the midst of all of this, there are ancient realities that don't change, and that is that you hear our prayers. You are as present with me here in Australia as you are with Shawn and the others in Canada or in the United States, if any have joined from there. And I just thank you, Father, for that, the confidence that we have, that we can speak directly to you, that you are present, that you love us, that you are attending to us, that you are birthing new realities in our world, even in the midst of the trauma and the grief and the pain that we are experiencing, some more than others, during this terrible pandemic. Give us wisdom. Give us strength and courage. Give us a sanctified form of imagination that can think differently and can engage with energy and enthusiasm the opportunities that this pandemic sets before us. We pray for our pastors, that you would support and nurture them in this time of difficulty. But above all, we pray that in the midst of this, we as your people might seize the opportunity to alert people to your reign, your kingship, your rule, and to do so in a way that is rooted in the confidence that you are moving history inexorably, unstoppably, to the end that you intended from the very beginning. Help us have confidence in your sovereignty, in your love and grace, and to be agents of those things in the world in which you've placed us. In Jesus' name, amen.
And Father, we thank you for Mike and for the ministry that you've called him to. And we thank you for the ability for us to spend some time with him today. Lord, we do pray incredible blessing on him and his ministry. We pray, Lord, that during this time that you would continue to provide him opportunity to serve you, to be impacting people across the globe. And Father, we pray blessing on him and Kaz and their family. We pray for health and safety for them. Lord, we pray that you would continue to bless them and fill them with your joy and your love and your peace. And pray, Lord, that all who continue to come in contact with them would see you in them. And so, Father, I join with my brothers and sisters online here in asking an incredible outpouring of blessing upon Mike and his family and all who he ministers to. And so we give you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. Mike, thank you so much. I have been giving thanks since you and Kaz were here in 2019 in the spring, and have been trying to find a way to get you back, and this was the fastest way that we could spend some time. So thank you, and thank you to everyone who has joined us tonight. We look forward to future conversations together.
Thank you. Peace. Blessings upon you.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.